It was 2 days away from Christmas Day, and Joe couldn't wait. He loved everything about Christmas, the lights, the music, spending time with loved ones. This time of year was just so magical. And this year, it would be exceptional. Joe had been planning for this Christmas all month. It was the first time in 6 years that he would see his children, as they had all moved away to start their own families. Yet, he didn't like anything getting him down. Though it was really hard to keep his chin up as of late, things kept going wrong for him. Food would burn or be undercooked. Lights would turn off or go missing. Joe was getting frustrated, thinking his wife had been messing with him. He confronted her. "Margaret, where are the oven mitts?" he asked, irritated. "I don't know, dear. I haven't touched them," Margaret replied, sighing heavily. Growling, he used a small towel instead, pulling the pie out of the oven. It was perfect, he thought. Joe had attempted to bake 9 pies already, none of them turning out right. He set the pie on the counter to cool, walked to the living room, and sat down in his chair for a rest. "Did you find the oven mitts?" Margaret asked, uninterested. "No, I haven't found anything that's gone missing the past few weeks," Joe spat. "Are you sure you haven't moved anything?" "I'm sure, Joe. I've not lost my mind," she responded. Margaret was getting mad that Joe kept blaming her for the missing items. She was sure he had only misplaced them. His mind was so focused on this Christmas, he might be the one losing it. "Why don't you check the basement for more lights? I'm sure we have lots," Margaret suggested. "Fine, I'll go check. Try not to touch anything while I'm gone," Joe said. Margaret hated the way Joe spoke to her. He always blamed her for everything that went wrong. She loved Joe. They had been married for over 50 years. However, he has never shown her any respect. She was growing tired of all the abuse, and after years and years of it, she had come up with a plan. Hearing the basement door open, Margaret stood, walking toward the basement, locking the door. After a couple minutes, she heard Joe banging on the door, calling to her to let him out. She smirked, walked back to her chair, and resumed her knitting. When Joe silenced himself, she went back to the door, pressing her ear against it, hoping to hear something. All she heard was shuffling, and a lot of cussing. Joe was fuming. He knew his wife had locked him in and was now ignoring him. When he got out of here, he would make her pay, he said to himself. He started kicking boxes and throwing things against the wall. On picking up a box, preparing to throw it in his fit of rage, he saw it, the brightly wrapped gift box with a festive bow on the top. Looking closer, he noticed a tag on it with his name, from Santa. Joe scoffed. "I think I'm a little too old to believe in Santa," he said to himself, laughing. Curiosity took over and he opened the box. He furrowed his brow, confused at what he was seeing. Pulling it out of the box, he inspected it closely. It looked like an elf doll, dressed in stereotypical clothing, sharp-toed shoes, and bells around the shirt collar. It felt soft on the outside, yet hard on the inside. He flipped it over, thinking there might be a voice box in the back. When he touched the back, the thing made a small sound. He searched for the batteries, but couldn't find them. When the doll moved both arms, Joe dropped it. The doll screeched, jumping up on its feet. "How dare you?" the doll said. "One. What are you?" Joe stuttered, fear evident in his voice. "I'm an elf, obviously. Are you blind?" The elf sneered. "Aren't you supposed to be jolly?" Joe asked, not believing his eyes. The elf laughed harder than Joe thought was necessary. "What's so funny?" Joe asked angrily. The elf continued to laugh, taking a deep breath before speaking. "You've been naughty, Joe," the elf said. Joe's eyes went wide. "How do you know my name?" he asked, confused. "I already told you. I'm Santa's elf. I know everything about you. You have not been very kind to your wife," he explained. "He deserved everything she got," Joe said defensively. "She didn't deserve the bruises, the fear," the elf shot back. "You don't know me," Joe yelled, trying to justify his abuse. "I know enough. Now, you will feel pain and suffer for what you have done," the elf responded, bored. It was Joe's turn to laugh. "And you think you'll be the one to do that," he said between breaths, as one weaving the network of connections which linked the hooks together. The elf smiled, nodding his head slowly. He reached for his back pocket, pulling out a small knife. Joe chuckled at the hum at seeing the tiny weapon. "You think that toy's going to kill me?" Joe joked. The elf didn't say anything for a few moments. When he finally spoke, his voice seemed deeper, more demonic. "No, it will cause excruciating pain until you bleed to death," he said simply. With unnatural speed and precise aim, the elf lashed out at Joe's body, cutting through various parts of his skin. Joe howled in pain, trying with all his might to catch the tiny creature, to no avail. The elf kept slicing through skin, cutting any part of his body that wasn't covered in blood. Finally, he went after Joe's face, attacking it with such ferocity that his face looked like it had gone through a meat grinder. Satisfied with a job well done, the elf headed for the stairs to the door, ignoring Joe's cries and pleas for help. He knocked on the door in code so Margaret would know it was him and not Joe. Margaret was still on the other side of the door, listening to the attack taking place behind it when she heard the specific knock. She quickly opened the door, letting the tiny man out, not wanting him to lose whatever sense of control he might have had over his life. The man stopped next to the three. "Thank you," she said, tears threatening to escape. "I should be thanking you for writing to Santa," he said. Margaret took a deep breath, exhaling loudly. "I can finally know peace," she told him. The woman sighed. "Well, the thing is, you've been naughty too," the elf replied. "What do you mean? I haven't done anything," she responded, perplexed. "You asked for your husband to be murdered. No matter how evil he was, it's still a very naughty thing to do," he explained. Margaret started panicking. "Are you going to kill me next?" she asked, scared. "Yes," the elf said coldly. The siblings arrived at their parents' house late that night. They had been knocking on the door for ages with no answer. Deciding to just walk in, they grabbed the spare key hidden under the mat. Opening the door, they screamed, seeing their mother on the floor in the kitchen, bloody and cold. They called for their dad, but no answer came. Then they noticed the basement door open. So they ventured closer, seeing small, bloody handprints on the door. Upon entering the basement, they discovered the grisly scene in front of them, their dad's mutilated body lying in a pool of blood. Running up the stairs to call the police, they stopped in their tracks. The elf was standing at the top of the stairs, smiling at them maliciously. Brandishing a knife, he told them, "You two have been naughty." The courage to step out of the comfort zone will make a person's attitude much more mature and resilient in facing challenges. However, not all hopes align with desires, especially if the mental strength is not yet sufficient. This is the condition experienced by a young man when he decided to pursue his education at a boarding school. Instead of becoming independent, his new life left him with deep trauma. This young man from Malaysia shared a dark story from 10 years ago when he lived in a dormitory. He described his dormitory as having 3 floors and being located in a remote place. The mysterious events he experienced began when the 3rd floor of his dormitory building was left empty and uninhabited. This piqued the young man's curiosity. The academic year I entered didn't attract many new students, so the surroundings of the dormitory were quite quiet. My room is on the ground floor, but every time I want to go to my room, I always look up to the 3rd floor. As one said, because from a distance, I feel an unpleasant aura. The 3rd floor has been empty for years. But why? He said, beginning his scary story. When asked by their senior, they fell silent, as if hiding something that should not be known by many people. Seniors always say there are certain things that are better not to be known. Even though it sounds scary, it actually makes me more curious, said the young man. Even so, the young man's stubbornness turned out to backfire on him when he discovered the truth that only brought misfortune. My friend was unwell, so he didn't attend the exam in class. I decided to take care of him in the dormitory. At that moment, it crossed my mind to take this opportunity to check the atmosphere on the 3rd floor of the dormitory, he said. While his friends were busy with exams, this young man was happy to finally sneak out of his room. He had imagined, and finally being able to find out the reason why all the seniors and some teachers were afraid to talk. But before I could step out of the room to explore the 3rd floor, I suddenly felt very drowsy. This is very strange because my body has been feeling fresh all this time. I automatically jumped onto the bed and slept first, he said. Not long after falling asleep, he woke up. Faintly, he heard someone knocking on the door of his dorm room. When he turned his gaze to look at the wall clock, it was only 3:30 p.m. It's impossible for the kids to just be coming back from their exam at this hour, she thought, full of confusion. Even more surprising was when the young man discovered that his sick roommate had also disappeared without a trace. My friend is no longer here. The room suddenly felt very quiet. The outside also felt extraordinarily silent. The sounds of other dormitory residents were not heard, not even the sounds of animals, as if I were in a vacuum space in the sky, he recalled. When he opened the door to leave the room, the young man was astonished to see that it was already night and pitch dark outside. Earlier, he had just seen that it was still 3:30 p.m. The dormitory looked empty, as if it were a school holiday. I was the only living being in the dormitory yard at that time. The body feels cold when the night wind blows gently. I looked up at the sky. Neither the moon nor the stars were visible. It was pitch dark. Fortunately, the light in front of the dormitory is still on. Even that one flickers a lot, like it's about to die. Suddenly, my body felt like it was being pushed to the 3rd floor, said the young man. It turns out that what was found on the 3rd floor changed the young man's life forever. By one, I climbed the stairs, and the atmosphere was indeed very quiet. Finally, I reached the 3rd floor. The hairs on my body kept standing on end. So cold that white smoke comes out of my mouth every time I breathe. My body is shivering. I'm trying to process what's happening. Suddenly, I was grabbed from behind. My neck was ensnared by something. I couldn't identify what that something was because I couldn't see behind me. Its grip is very strong. I immediately felt weak. At the same time, I smelled a rancid odor piercing my nose. After that, a hoarse voice tried to speak in my ear. But I didn't understand because it sounded like a foreign language, the young man recounted. In that state of panic, the young man tried to fight back to save himself. Despite the pain and shortness of breath from the choking, the young man continued to struggle. But he couldn't lift a finger to hit his daughter. Is this what death feels like? I can feel death approaching. I try to fight it, but I am getting weaker. My soul feels like it's being pulled out of this body. Memories of life are playing in my head like a replayed video. I have already surrendered, he said. Suddenly, his ears caught the recitation of the holy verses of the Quran, which seemed to come from nowhere. It wasn't very clear, but he could hear it. At that moment, the noose around the young man's neck suddenly loosened by itself, and his body fell limply to the floor, falling deep into the ocean of darkness. I fell into a bottomless pit. My vision blurred and I lost consciousness, said the young man. The young man finally woke up, and a big surprise awaited him. His body jolted, and he felt sweat soaking his entire body. I tried to open my eyes and was shocked to see that I was already in the dormitory prayer room. I was surrounded by other students. They formed a circle around me. It was as if they were reciting something towards me. A sense of panic seeped into his body. What does all this mean? He recalled. It turned out that the young man had just fainted and was being treated because he was disturbed by a supernatural being while going up to the 3rd floor of the dormitory. There was a man wearing a cap and a white turban who approached me, introducing himself as a cleric. He said I was being treated for disturbances caused by supernatural beings. He said that the disturbances were caused by supernatural beings. After my condition stabilized, I was taken home and decided not to return to that school. I enrolled in a regular daily school, he concluded. Libraries often become a focal point for residents seeking academic reference materials based on the available reading materials. So, what do you say, Alex? There are times when the library also becomes a place for some people to seek tranquility. Unlike other spaces, libraries are always quiet and visitors are prohibited from being noisy. However, a public library in a remote location in Sarawak, Malaysia, is not only quiet. It is said that this building is haunted and has a terrifying story. A young man named Haziq shared his experience as the sole librarian in Pekanbaru. The 25-year-old young man recalled a scary story from 3 years ago while working in the almost always deserted library. With the death of the chief of police, the library had been crowded. My scope of work includes organizing books, creating catalog notes, maintaining the cleanliness of the library, and providing customer service. I often find myself alone in the library. Occasionally a colleague from out of town comes by, explained Haziq. Haziq admitted that he enjoys working alone because it makes him feel calm and allows him to focus on his work. But there are times when Haziq feels overwhelmed by the many tasks he has to complete on his own. Haziq then explained the history and uniqueness of the public library in Pekanbaru, which is so remote in Sarawak. According to Haziq, the public library was opened in the 1970s and is located in the center of Pekanbaru, which has a population of around 1,000 people. The nearest city is Miri, which is 74 kilometers away, If taken via the highway, it takes about 1.5 hours, explained Hazik. Every week there are usually 2 to 4 visitors to the public library. They are usually school students and parents. Although it is remote and far from the city, this library always receives shipments of new books every year. However, Hazik once heard from the locals that the land for building the library is known to be haunted. This place is said to be haunted, and many staff before me were disturbed, but I steeled my heart because I want to work, said Hazik. Uncovering the past history of the Pekan Belarus Library, Hazik revealed that local residents said the land where the library stands used to be a village of supernatural beings, otherworld, ghost village. That is one of the reasons why the library is so full of paranormal activities. Hazik himself has experienced it, and it can be said to be the scariest experience compared to the previous stab. The library door opens by itself. It happened 2 years ago. I had just started working there, still fresh in my memory, Thursday at 4:30 p.m. after Asr. At that time, I was working on the list of books to be stored in the warehouse. Suddenly, the front door of the library opened as if someone had entered, he said. However, when Hazik turned around, he saw no one. It couldn't be the wind, because the library's glass door is heavy and has a stopper. So, it's impossible for the library door to open by itself. There must be something that pushed it forcefully. At the same time, Hazik suddenly felt the temperature in the library drop, and the room became very cold. In fact, the air conditioner in the library had been broken for a long time. The only thing that still works is the fan. At that moment, Hazik's hair stood on end. He felt that there was a supernatural being accompanying him in the library. I was already feeling uneasy. To avoid anything bad happening, I quickly finished my work, he said. Okay. The finest music, the ultimate recipe for peace, Grayson concluded. In the following days, Hazik bravely went to work as usual because he really needed the money. So, he had to strengthen his mental resolve. It turns out there is a guardian, not human / supposed to be old, spirit. Not long after that, I asked a friend with a sixth sense to see the library. You said he did see a something living in the library? My friend only dared to look from the outside, said Hazik. His friend suggested Hazik clean the library by bringing in a religious teacher. And Ustaz agreed, but the condition was that the cleansing process could only be done from a distance because they were worried the situation might get worse, said Hazik. Using his phone in loudspeaker mode, Hazik walked to every corner of the library while playing the recitation of the holy verses from the Ustaz. But an unexpected thing happened. The ghost of the library guard went berserk. The books flew. Some hit the Ustaz's head, causing the Ustaz to immediately fall unconscious. When Hazik tried to help him, suddenly, his body fell stiff to the floor. The ghost approached him. His face was scary, with a strong stench. This is my house. If you want to be here, you have to respect me. Give me Saza. Give me good luck. This is my house. If you want to be here, you have to respect me. Give me good luck. The voice was heard very heavy and resounding. As far as I became unconscious, as far as I remember, when I woke up, I was already in the village clinic.